Welcome to Stories of Brave Mothers, a channel dedicated to telling real and touching stories of brave mothers from around the world.
They say learning to code is hard. Now imagine learning it all by yourself, with no money, 2 teenage kids, an old computer, and a stack of overdue bills. This is the story of a brave mother who, even without a degree, support, or experience, decided to rewrite her own future. When everything around her said she should give up, she hit the enter key toward courage and proved that knowledge can be the code that breaks the cycle of poverty. It was early March in Detroit. The rooftops were still coated with a thin layer of ice, and the wind cut sharply through the poorly sealed windows of the small apartment where Alicia Thompson, a 34-year-old black woman, lived with her 2 teenage sons, Marcus, 15, and Jaden, 14. Alicia got up every day before sunrise, slipped into her worn-out diner uniform, and made a weak pot of coffee, often just to warm her hands before heading out for work. Even after more than 7 years at the same job, her paycheck barely covered rent, the electric bill, and maybe 1 or 2 decent meals during the week. She lived in survival mode, juggling bills in ways only brave mothers can truly understand. There were nights she had nothing but a slice of bread for dinner, just to make sure her boys had enough on their plates. But even in the midst of that scarcity, there was one thing Alicia never let her children go without: her presence. She'd come home exhausted, yet always sat down with her sons, asked how school went, and listened to the dreams they weren't sure they'd ever be able to chase. Marcus wanted to be an engineer. Jaden dreamed of designing video games. Hearing them say those things tightened something in her chest, not because they dreamed too big, but because she didn't know how to make those dreams possible. They attended an underfunded public school. The computers were outdated, classrooms overcrowded, and the surrounding area filled with danger. Still, Alicia encouraged them every single day not to give up, to believe they could become more than what the system expected of them. Alicia didn't have a college degree. She got pregnant young, at 19, and since then, life had been a non-stop fight. The boy's father disappeared before Jaden was born. From that moment on, she never had help. Not emotional, not financial. Many nights, she cried quietly in the bathroom after the boys were asleep. She cried from fear, from exhaustion, and from the growing frustration of not being able to break the cycle of poverty. She knew she was a good mom, but sometimes it felt like that just wasn't enough. One afternoon, Alicia got off work early and walked into the apartment to find Marcus on the family's old computer, trying to watch a video on programming logic. It froze every couple of minutes, the image pixelated, but the spark in his eyes didn't flicker. He was completely absorbed. "Where'd you find that video?" Alicia asked, sitting beside him. "At school," Marcus replied. "One of the guys told me about a site that teaches programming. I thought it was cool. I want to try it. Mom, I think you can make games this way." She smiled, not fully understanding what he meant, but amazed by his excitement. That night, as she washed dishes, Alicia couldn't stop thinking. Programming. It sounded like something from another world. A world of rich people, offices with air conditioning, and free coffee. But what if she tried to understand it too? What if, despite all her limitations, she could learn this stuff? She'd never had time to dream for herself. Her kids always came first. But maybe this could be a way out. The next day, while the boys were at school, Alicia sat down at the old computer and typed, "How to learn programming from scratch." The terms looked like another language, but she found an introductory video. She barely understood a thing, but she watched it again, and again, and again. Weeks passed like that. She used the computer while the kids were out, wearing headphones, pausing the video every few seconds. writing notes in a notebook. Every small victory felt huge. Understanding what a variable was, what an if meant. She felt like a child learning to walk. At first, the boys thought it was funny. "Mom, you studying programming? Seriously?" Marcus chuckled. "What? Why not?" she replied, pretending to be offended. "You think your mom isn't smart enough?" "No, it's just, I don't know. It's kinda cool." That kinda cool soon turned into admiration when Alicia began showing them her first working codes. A button that changed color, a web page with the family's name. It was simple, but it was real. Slowly, the boys started studying with her. The apartment, once filled with tension and fear, now echoed with lines of code, laughter, and hope. But the journey was just beginning. Alicia knew YouTube tutorials wouldn't be enough. To escape poverty, she had to be more than curious. She had to be good. She had to transform. And that transformation would take more than patience. It would take courage, resilience, and an unshakable belief that it was possible. Even without anyone beside her saying, "It'll work out," Alicia chose to become that voice, for her sons and for herself. She began turning her exhaustion into fuel. The time she used to spend trying to rest her body was now filled with digital books, scribbled notes, and videos from developers who seemed to live in a different universe, one where code was a secret language that unlocked doors. She still worked at the diner, still took 2 packed buses to get there and 2 more to get back, still smiled mechanically at impatient customers and carried heavy trays while her feet ached. But now, something inside her had shifted. She began to see possibilities where there used to be walls. One day, the diner manager complained that their system kept freezing, and it took days for a tech guy to fix anything. Alicia, her heart racing, asked if she could take a look. He shrugged, not taking her seriously. But by the end of the shift, he let her mess with the ancient setup. Basically just a clunky spreadsheet program. She spent that weekend researching how to restructure those files, automate basic functions, and improve efficiency. On Monday, she came in with a flash drive that held a redesigned version, more organized, with buttons for orders and shortcuts for daily calculations. The manager was impressed, not because it was revolutionary, but because someone from the invisible crowd of workers had taken that kind of initiative. She didn't get a raise or a promotion, but she got something even more valuable: trust. And that trust reawakened something inside her that had been sleeping for years. The feeling that she could grow, that her life didn't have to be confined to present limitations. So, she began to dream bigger. On weekends, when the boys went out to play basketball, Alicia dove into her studies. She built a routine: 1 hour of logic, 1 hour of practice, then time to review her mistakes. She found a website that offered free certified courses. They were more advanced, and the first few lessons felt like Greek. But she didn't give up. She'd find parallel videos explaining the basics just to keep up. Sometimes, she'd spend days completing a single module. Others might finish in an afternoon. But she kept going. Eventually, she started sharing what she learned with her sons. Marcus got into design. Jaden wanted to make games. Together, they built a small project on the old computer. A web page with their names that changed colors and displayed phrases like, "A family that learns together, grows together." The apartment didn't change physically. It was still small and dimly lit, but the energy was different. Dinner conversations shifted from unpaid bills to ideas for new projects. The constant fear of not enough had turned into motivation, but none of it came easy. There were days the internet cut out during key lessons, days the computer froze, wiping out hours of work, days she was so drained she fell asleep on her notes. One weekend, Marcus came home with fire in his eyes. A teacher had said something that crushed him. "You, a black kid from the hood wanting to be an engineer. Wake up," Marcus told his mom with a lump in his throat. maybe expecting her to admit how hard it all was. But Alicia, with tears in her eyes, knelt in front of him and said, "Son, don't you ever let anyone write your story for you. Not me, not some teacher. You can be whatever you want to be, but you've got to believe it. Every single day, even on the hard ones." That night stayed etched in all their memories. Alicia started learning about the job market too. She found out many companies were hiring freelancers for basic web development work, simple websites, minor code fixes, things she could learn with effort. She created a shy little profile on a freelancing site, wrote a short bio, dedicated mother, passionate about technology, looking for opportunities to grow. At first, no one responded, not even a single view. But she didn't quit. She rewrote the bio, added screenshots of her work, put together a mini portfolio with the projects she'd done for the diner and her sons. And after 2 months of silence, a message finally came through. A small jewelry business needed a simple website. Alicia trembled reading it. She replied yes, spent the next few nights sleepless, studying, testing, building, delivered it 3 days later, but included a sincere apology and offered free revisions. The client loved it and referred her to someone else. That first job paid $50. Small for most people, but for Alicia, it was a turning point. It was the first time she'd earned money using her mind, not her tired body. She used it to buy a new mouse and a couple of notebooks for the boys. But more than anything, she used it to feed her belief, because in that moment, she wasn't just a waitress anymore, not just a mother surviving day to day. She was a brave mother fighting to break the cycle. And even if no one knew her name yet, she was already rewriting her story. And this was only the beginning. The months following that first freelance job were an emotional roller coaster in Alicia's life. On one hand, she had proven to herself that she was capable. On the other, the obstacles now seemed even bigger, as if the universe wanted to test her courage at every new step. The old computer at home, already tired from years of use, began showing more serious signs of failure. It would shut off on its own, freeze during video lessons, and delete files for no reason. Each malfunction felt like a bucket of cold water. But Alicia, resilient in the way only a brave mother can be, did what she could to work around it. She pointed a small fan directly at the CPU, hoping it would prevent overheating. She'd leave the computer running for hours with nothing open, just to make sure it warmed up slowly. Sometimes, she even prayed it would turn on again. And when it didn't, she cried quietly, but never in front of her sons. She knew that machine wasn't just a computer. It was her portal to transformation. The diner job was getting harder too. The new manager, stricter and colder, started pushing unrealistic goals and cut the few overtime hours that helped Alicia stay afloat. The shifts got shorter, but more intense, and her paycheck, less and less enough. Bills began piling up. Rent was late once, then twice. Then came the power shutoff notice, and with it, a familiar fear, the fear of having to choose between surviving or dreaming. "Maybe I should stop freelancing for now," she whispered to herself one night, staring at the notebook where she kept her course notes. Just until things settled down. But the moment she looked over and saw her sons studying, so excited about the new things they'd been discovering together, she swallowed those words. Stop now. After everything they had accomplished? No, she hadn't come this far just to give up. So she made a bold decision. She sold the only television in the house. It was old, but it still worked. She took the few dollars she got and added some she had saved and bought a second-hand laptop from a pawn shop. It was ugly. The screen was scratched. One key was missing, but it worked, and it worked without crashing. For Alicia, it felt like winning the lottery. She cried from joy, holding the plastic bag the laptop came in. "What happened to the TV?" Jaden asked. puzzled, when he came home from school. "I turned it into a rocket ship," she said with a wink. "Now we're going farther." They laughed, but they knew. They knew it was more than just a cute metaphor. It was the truth. With the new laptop, Alicia picked up her pace. She joined tech groups on Facebook, followed developers on Twitter, and watched live streams of people talking about programming languages she'd never even heard of. JavaScript, Python, React. It felt like learning a new language without a translator. But she kept at it, took notes, repeated terms out loud, covered her bedroom with Post-its full of concepts and code. But the hardest challenge was still ahead. One day, Marcus came home different, quiet. Normally, he'd be the first to talk about class or joke around with his brother. But that day, he went straight to his room and slammed the door. Alicia felt a chill run down her spine. She walked over and knocked gently. "Can I come in?" The silence on the other side already told her everything. When she entered, Marcus was sitting on his bed, his eyes red. "What happened, son?" He took a moment to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. "They called me a fake programmer at school today. A guy in my class said black kids don't become engineers. That's for Asians or rich white kids." Everyone laughed. Alicia's blood boiled, but she took a deep breath. She sat beside him, placed her hand on his shoulder, and said, "Son, listen to me. What you felt today, that pain, that anger, don't let it turn into shame. Let it become fire, a fire that pushes you forward. They didn't laugh at you. They laughed at what they can't imagine. And we're here to prove them wrong." She hugged him tight, and in that embrace, she made a silent vow. She would do everything in her power to make sure that boy and his brother never believed there was any place they didn't belong. But the challenges kept coming. At the diner, Alicia was fired. Official reason, downsizing. Real reason? She was different. She didn't just follow orders. She asked questions. She spent her break studying code instead of gossiping. And deep down, everyone knew she didn't belong in that place anymore. That night, she cried, really cried into her pillow, unable to hide it from the boys this time. "Mom," Jaden said softly, trying to comfort her, "you always say things are gonna work out. But what about now?" She wiped her tears, took a deep breath, and said, Now we're gonna find out if I was right." And I believe I was. With her severance pay, Alicia caught up on rent and electricity. Then she did something she never thought she could afford. She enrolled in an online web development course. It was a basic program, 3 months long, and offered a recognized certificate. Alicia had never done anything like it before, but she clicked enroll with trembling fingers. On the first day, she felt like a complete fraud. All the other students used technical terms she still mixed up. Some had college degrees, others experience in IT, and she was just a mom, a black woman from Detroit's outskirts. But by the end of the first week, she was the first to submit the practical assignment. By the end of the second, she received praise from the instructor. By the end of the third, she was helping classmates with their questions. And when the course finished, she was invited to join a mentorship program for women in tech. She cried again, but this time, out of relief, out of pride, out of being seen. Her life hadn't changed completely. Not yet. She still didn't have a stable job as a developer. But now she had a resume. She had a network. She finally had a real path. And most importantly, she knew now that the impossible was just a phase before the possible. The mentorship invitation came by email. Alicia read it 3 times before she believed it was real. The program was offered by a nonprofit organization that supported black women transitioning into tech careers. The name of the program said it all: Women Who Transform. She clicked accept with tears in her eyes. It wasn't just a course. It was a doorway, a real chance to connect with the tech world, with other women like her, and with opportunities that once felt as distant as a star. During the weekly video calls, Alicia met other moms, young women, and professionals who, like her, had found programming as a path forward. Many came from difficult backgrounds: domestic violence, chronic unemployment, abandonment. But they all had one thing in common: an unstoppable drive to succeed without stepping over anyone, just by rising. Alicia's mentor was a senior developer at a tech company in California. Her name was Marissa, charismatic, direct, and, above all, attentive. From their first meeting, she noticed something special in that soft-spoken woman with the steady gaze. "Alicia, you've got something rare," she said. "You don't just learn, you absorb. And in our world, that's gold." Over the next 3 months, Alicia grew at an incredible pace. She learned how to use GitHub, collaborate on real-world projects, work with remote teams, and build more advanced applications. Marissa, impressed, recommended her for a junior position at a startup focused on educational technology. "I don't have formal experience," Alicia said nervously when she was invited to interview. "And everything you've lived, doesn't that count as experience?" Marissa smiled knowingly. The interview took place over video. Alicia used the kitchen wall as her background and wore her best blouse, even if it was a little faded. And she spoke straight from the heart. She shared her story, her self-taught journey, what she had learned, her personal projects, the website for the diner, the homepage she built with her sons, the tech course, the mentorship. She talked about how she used technology not just to survive, but to rebuild her family's self-worth. And at the end of the call, the recruiter was silent. That silence said everything. "You're exactly the kind of person we're looking for," he finally said. 2 days later, the email arrived. She was hired. Starting salary, $3,200. Remote work, flexible hours, health insurance. Alicia screamed, "Literally!" She screamed so loud that the upstairs neighbors banged on the floor. She laughed, cried, spun in circles in the middle of the tiny living room while her sons looked on in disbelief. "I did it, ha boys! I did it! We did it!" Her sons jumped on her. Marcus held back tears. Jaden didn't. Alicia wasn't just celebrating a job. She was celebrating the shattering of an invisible wall, a new life, the fact that, for the first time, she wouldn't have to choose between paying rent or buying a decent computer. In the weeks that followed, she set up a tiny home office in the living room, a makeshift desk, a decent chair she bought secondhand, a whiteboard taped to the wall where she wrote her weekly goals. Life at home changed. Her sons now saw her as a professional role model. They wanted to learn more. Jaden started a free game development course. Marcus got into interface design. The 3 of them built an educational website project for local students. Together, one day, their old neighbor, Mrs. Carroll, saw Alicia in the building's entryway and said, "You look different, girl. Got a sparkle in your eyes I don't think I've ever seen before." And she was right. There was a new kind of tired in Alicia. Not the exhaustion of meaningless labor, but the kind that comes with growth, with evolution, with dreaming. The kind that tells you every drop of sweat has a purpose. One Saturday morning, while they were having breakfast, Jaden suddenly asked, "Mom, do you think we're rich now?" Alicia laughed. "No, baby, not yet. But for the first time, we're building wealth. And I'm not just talking about money. I'm talking about knowledge, freedom, choice. That's something no one can take from us." Later on, she began speaking at local nonprofits. She shared her story at digital inclusion events, public schools, and women's circles. She became a reference in the community. She hadn't gone to college. She wasn't a CEO, but she was an example, a symbol of resilience and real transformation. "Brave mother," read a banner made by the students at Jaden's school to welcome her to one of her talks. "You're my hero," said a young girl. eyes glowing, as she hugged Alicia tightly, and Alicia replied with the same phrase she'd been telling her sons since the very beginning. "If I made it, you can too. But you've got to believe, even when it feels impossible." 1 year after landing the job, Alicia was promoted to mid-level developer. She bought a brand new laptop for each of her sons, and she hung a small plaque on the wall of the living room that read, "No fortune is inherited here. Here, we build courage." And so, day by day, line by line of code, Alicia didn't just lift her sons out of poverty. She showed them, and everyone around her, that the mind is the key that can unlock even the most tightly sealed doors of inequality. And that key, she forged it herself. Alicia didn't inherit wealth. She built courage. Line by line of code, she rewrote her own story and paved the way for her children's future. If this story touched you in any way, if it reminded you of the strength that lives in mothers all around the world, then please subscribe to the channel and leave a like. It really helps more people discover stories like Alicia's, because there are thousands of brave mothers out there, and each one of them carries within her a whole world of love, courage, and resilience.